Yeah. Well, listen, I hope that today's briefings that are taking place for the president-elect, briefings, very similar briefings that I've had myself, including late yesterday before I came back to New Jersey, will solidify for him a very clear view that there is total unanimity in the intelligence community at every level. And I'm sure you're all familiar that there's many different elements of our intelligence: CIA, DIA, Defense Intelligence, NSA, FBI, the Bureau of National Intelligence. The list goes on and on. They are in total unanimity. That's not often the case as it relates to intelligence questions. Sometimes there's differences of views. Sometimes there's difference in what they will call the degree of certainty that they have. In this, they are united. So I hope that today the president-elect having, I don't know if it's taken place already, but it's either has or is going to take place, will now have a different view. If he doesn't, he is isolated in a view that is not only outside of the mainstream of the intelligence community, but that he will find outside of the mainstream of members of his own party and of generally, on a bipartisan basis, the members of Congress. So, I hope that he comes to that realization. I think it's incredibly important for the president-elect, who will have to depend upon these very same intelligence sources to deal with challenges globally, far beyond Russia, that if he undermines their credibility, when he seeks to use their information in the future as a basis for action somewhere in the world will say, well, wait a minute, you said that they're not credible. Why do you say they're credible now? So this is very consequential, and I hope that he will have a time to recalibrate. Yes. Well, yeah. Well, obviously, listen. I've been doing foreign policy in the Congress now. This is my 25th year serving on the House and Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and I recognize that the Secretary of State is ultimately the employee, so to speak, of the President of the United States. But I will also say that the questions that will be posed on both sides at his hearing, particularly in this matter, will be very sharp, and there will be very little room for equivocation before the committee to satisfy the committee. And that doesn't mean that do I expect him to word it in such a way that will be a direct contravention of the president-elect if the president-elect doesn't change his views after the briefing today? Maybe not, but he'll have to leave a sense of confidence before the committee that has to vote on his nomination before he even gets to the floor, that in fact he understands the nature of the challenge, the seriousness of it, the consequences, and what the potential responses need to be. Because while you ultimately have to, as the Secretary of State, respond to whoever is the president that you serve under, you also have the opportunity in private to make a very strong case about what the response should be and what the position of the United States should be. And I would want to hear from a Secretary of State who's going to have a very strong response to, in this case, for example, Russia. I think Senator Rubio, who sits on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, has some concerns that he has publicly expressed. And I think many members on the Republican side are looking for the hearing to give them a better sense. But I don't think that this is a simple slam dunk. I think Mr. Tillerson is going to have to do some convincing and some assuaging and erasing some serious concerns. Now, whether or not, when it comes time for a vote, I took positions on foreign policy different than the incumbent president, for which there have been consequences. And I don't know that my Republican colleagues will ultimately seek to oppose, even if they believe the person should not be nominated, whether they will seek to oppose an incumbent president at the time of their own party. It's always a tough burden, but it's an important one if you're going to exercise the role of advising consent in a way that was meant by the founders of the country.